Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Captain Cheese. Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different from what you've seen on my channel. If you've been here from the start about a year ago, you kind of know I just do more video game clips and, sessions, I guess you can call it. I have started up my streams, so if you guys have followed me on there, you guys kind of know that mainly it's about video games. But today I'm going to kind of do a little review comparison to Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, that just came out today on Disney Plus. So the first episode is out. Now, before I get into this, I just want you to know out there that I don't know everything, and I don't think I know everything, but I have read the Miss Marvel comics, and I'm rereading it right now just to help me with this comparison. So I'm just here to kind of give my thoughts about the show and how it relates to the comics and kind of guess what's going to happen later on and, see where that takes us. So hopefully you enjoy this little video that I'm going to make. I have no idea yet how long it's going to be, so this is something that I'm doing for the first time, and if I do mess up or if I do say something false, please let me know in the comments and I will do my research to correct that if I did say something false. But mainly I'm just here kind of free wording everything and just kind of going out on a vibe and doing something a little bit different that I might enjoy and maybe also you. So we're going to get right into it from the beginning and go from there. All right, so are you guys ready to go? I am. I'm going to try my best here, okay? I don't know how many times I'm going to have to redo this or kind of look for information, but we shall figure it out. So, right in the beginning of the show, it starts with this great storytelling moment. And that's actually very similar to the beginning of the comic back in 2014, where Kamala is telling the story about the Avengers saving, the day, pretty much in the comics. But in the show, they're actually talking about how cool the Avengers are and how she really likes them and that how they defeated Thanos, and she's like really focusing on Captain Marvel. She's even mentioned when she punched Thanos in the face. So she is definitely a fangirl to all the Avengers, but of course she is a true fangirl to Miss Marvel. She really looks up to her. Now, that was really cool because I like that how they transitioned the little story in the beginning of the comic to the actual show. That was really good. And this show so far has brought a lot of what's in the comic to the actual show. Now, I know they've done that in other shows that Disney Plus has brought out, little comparisons, things like that. I know that there was a big one with Hawkeye where it kind of really followed the same characters, the same names, and same situations as far as what was in the comic to the actual Hawkeye show. So I know that one did really well. Personally, I haven't read the Hawkeye series yet, but we're not talking about that today. So we're talking about Miss Marvel and what I have read and what I've seen and what I've liked. So that was the first kind of similarity that I found. The second one is also right in the beginning of the show when they're having breakfast and Amir is praying at the table, and then the father, Abu, if I'm not mistaken, was like, if you keep praying, you're never going to eat and you're going to starve to death. And then that was actually from the comic. That was right in the first few pages, and they brought that out too. Another thing that they brought out fairly quickly was that Amir's actually already engaged, so he will be getting married at some point in time, maybe in this first season. I'm not too sure, but I know also, if I'm not mistaken, that in the 2016 issue comic that Amir actually finds his fiance there, and then they will eventually get married and then they have a child. So that series for the 2016 is actually like 30 something comics, so there's a lot of stories in that second issues, and also that kind of ties into Civil War Part 2, but we'll get into that way later. So moving forward, in the beginning, Kamala is pretty much just fantasizing about Miss Marvel, all the things about the Avengers that she loves, and of course there's Bruno. Bruno's like her best friend throughout the series, and they're like, they have this little love thing going on. Kamala kind of feels it, not really in the beginning, but she gets these kind of senses. But Bruno for sure likes her. Even in the comics, it's plain to see that he does like her. Later on in the show, we start going to meeting people that she goes to school with. Okay, so we have Zoe that's still there, and Zoe is kind of like the mean girl-ish. She's really popular, but she looks like down on Kamala, and then just makes fun of her. She dodgeball incidents. She messes with her. She throws basketball right in Kamala's face while they're playing. So just all these things of being the popular girl at school, but also being popular to get away with certain things and, treat people the way they shouldn't be treated. Then from Zoe, we do have Nakia, which is also I believe she's also Pakistani, and or Muslim. I'm not sure what ethnicity she is, but that's one of her closest friends as well, just because they shared that type of religion with each other. We don't see too much of Nakia in the first episode. It's mainly just Kamala's family, Bruno, and then Zoe. So those are like the main people right in the beginning, and the brother, of course, Amir. So we move on to later in the Disney Plus show where she wants to go to this Avengers convention. It's a fan convention where kind of like Comic-Con, but I think they call it Avenger Con. So I found that pretty cool because in the Marvel's Avengers game, when you're playing Kamala Khan's part pretty much in the beginning of the game, she actually does go to this convention where, it's all about the Avengers. They have collectibles, the actually Avengers are there. But in the Disney Plus show, they're not there. This is just a Comic-Con, or they're not there as far as what we've seen. You never know who might have been there and saw certain things happen. We don't know yet. So, but in the Avengers game, she's actually there with her father, and, it's kind of like a day thing, and then something happens, and then they get attacked, and then, Kamala ends up finding her powers at the end of the beginning mission of the Marvel's Avengers. So that was pretty cool. Kind of different than the comic, because in the comic she actually sneaks out of her room to go to a party by the beach, or by the lake, I guess, something like that. Yeah, somewhere in Jersey. So in the TV show, she really wants to go to this Avenger Con, and they're going through all these little things of trying to get her parents to say yes, but the parents are like, no, you're only 16. We don't want you to go out to these things at night with boys, especially boys, if there's going to be drinking too. And, that's kind of familiar to how I kind of grew up, where, I was only able to go to certain places, and then I had to be at certain times to get picked up and things like that. So I really understand what she's kind of going through there in that scenario. So later on, she ends up sneaking out with Bruno, and I'm leaving a lot out from the Disney Plus show because, like I said, I'm just trying to compare it to the comic a bit. So she ends up sneaking out, and I'll talk about the Disney Plus first. So she sneaks out of her room, and actually during the daytime, so only like 5 something, I think, in the Disney Plus show. That's a weird time to sneak out and be gone for at least 4 hours or so and not have your parents check in your room. That must be awesome. But that's what happens. So they go, and they're trying to get on the bus. Kamala loses her bike. She's not able to get it in. Then they have like this type of security camera thing that Bruno made, because actually Bruno's a freaking genius, and like in the 2016 series, he actually goes to Wakanda, and he's actually very intelligent. He learns a lot there. But going back to the show, so they end up going to the convention. Okay, they go in, they're having a great time. Pictures. They're playing with swords, everything like that. Then we get to what actually happens as far as how she gets her powers. But before we get into that, we're going to be talking about how the comic book played out. So the comic book, she leaves her room, she sneaks out by herself, not with Bruno. She ends up going to this party with, her classmates that are there. Zoe's there, of course, just kind of like in the Disney Plus show, but we'll get there. And she says hi. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you came out, Kamala. This is what Zoe's saying. And she's like, I thought like this was against your like religion or your family views, things like that. And she kind of just like brushes it off. She says a remark or something. And then somebody offers her a drink and she's like, what's in it? And the guy's like, it's orange juice. She takes a sip. Right when she's taking a sip, he's like, with vodka. She spits it all out. Very funny. And then guess who's there? Bruno. So Bruno gets him. I obviously got invited. And he kind of goes to these social things. And, since Kamala can't really go, he just goes by himself without a care in the world, not even thinking of Kamala's going to show up. But she's there. And that's kind of where we first get the realization that Bruno likes Kamala. So what happens is Kamala gets mad because Bruno's talking to her like her father, asking her if her parents know she's there, things like that. Why did you sneak out? And she's like, you're acting like my father. And, if you were Muslim, my family would probably throw me at you. And then she just storms off. And then Bruno's like, yeah, that would suck, right? Kind of like plays it off, but she's already walking in the distance. And so that's kind of where we're going to lead up to how she gets her powers in the comics and then how she gets them into the Disney Plus show. So in the Disney Plus show, how Kamala gets her powers is actually very interesting. And I'm still trying to figure out how and what exactly it is because it's so different from the comics. And I was kind of skeptical at first when I watched the trailer because I was like, well, that kind of sucks. Like, they kind of took out this whole big story and then, they changed it to something else. So what happens in the Disney Plus show is that they receive a package and it's from Kamala's grandma, which is her mom's mom. And she's like, why did she send all this junk? And then the mom's like, well, I would say it's because she's older, but that would be a lie. So I guess the mom just sends them certain things and it's going to be, for the family, part of it for Amir's wedding and, just a bunch of like, I wouldn't say junk, but it's like jewels, like little beads, things like that we've seen so far. But then she pulls out this bracelet and she asks the mom what that is. And the mom gives this look that she already knows what it is. And she's pretty much like, this is junk. You don't need to worry about this. Okay? And so the mom takes it away and goes upstairs or something. But in the comics, what happens is after Kamala storms off, after getting into a little argument with Bruno, she starts wandering off. And then there's just this massive mist that starts to appear in Jersey City. And Kamala doesn't even know what's going on. And she's kind of just walking through it. And just doing her thing, just trying to get home or walk away, and she doesn't really know which direction she's going. So back to the Disney Plus. So what happens is when they're at the Avenger Con, her and Bruno, there is a Captain Marvel costume contest for Captain Marvel. I'm not too sure why it's Captain Marvel cosplay contest. I guess maybe because that's what the show's about, but other than that, I have no idea why it's just her. So there's a bunch of people, and guess who's there? Zoe. So Zoe's there, and first appearance, the costume that Zoe was wearing for me, it was a lot better than Kamala's. Kamala's was pretty cool, and that's also something that made me skeptical about the show, is that I was like, that's her costume, like that's what she's gonna wear. And after reading both series of the 2014 and the 2016, I was like, that's really what she's gonna wear. Like it looks like just like a leather jacket painted and all that stuff. But I get it, it's real world scenario, and Kamala doesn't really have that type of style where actually her mom says it like skimpy, so not like tight, anything like that. It's like a leather jacket. Anyways, So guess who's there? Zoe's there. And so now she starts to get nervous, and Bruno made it a point in the show to tell her, like, oh, you should make this your own costume and bring something Pakistani that, you know, resembles who you are. So I don't recall how she got the bracelet back, but she ends up bringing the bracelet. She can't open it. She twists something, looks like it's on like the forearm part. She like twists something and it opens up. Right when she puts it on, of course, there's like this surge of like fog going around her that only she visibly can see. And then something happens where I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it looked like she was falling down, and then she kind of came back, but like she went to like this different realm, this different dimension, like really quick, and then she kind of came back and she snapped out of it. So she's still nervous going on stage, and then she ends up walking to the front of where everybody is on the stage. Don't know why, but that's just how the show happened. And she's like really sensitive to the lights and the flashes and all these things that are going on. And then she ends up like getting the power from her hand, from the bracelet, but it comes from her hand. It's like these big kind of crystal shards that are coming out, but like in full pieces. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And so all those things start to come out, and then everyone's just kind of slightly scared, slightly panicking because they're not sure exactly what's going on. And then she ends up hitting a big Ant-Man head, and everybody's like, whoa. And then everybody starts clapping, and then, you know, they're like, that's the best costume and everything, and everyone's all going crazy. They're like, wow, that's amazing, everything like that. Then the head falls off, and then it causes all this little destruction inside the Avenger Con. And then there's a big Thor hammer, and it gets like cut from the cables, and then Zoe somehow like here, and then it starts going, and she's going back and forth on it, holding on. And I don't know how she didn't get squished more, because she hit a wall, and there was some momentum in there, so I don't know how she didn't really get more hurt. But she hits the wall, falls down, and then while she's falling, Kamala reaches her hand out, and her embiggen, it's like a bigger hand, and it kind of just lightens the fall. It doesn't fully catch her, but like she falls hand, and then it goes away, and then she saves her. And then everyone's still panicking, but Zoe gets up and she goes to Kamala, and she's like, oh my gosh, like, your costume's so good, and I can't believe it. Actually, I'm wrong right there. That happened before. So after all that stuff happened with the shards, that's when Zoe came up to her, and she's like, oh my god, I thought my costume was going to be the best one, but yours, and what'd you do? How'd you do that? All that stuff. And then she was like just in love with Kamala's costume, but she didn't know it was Kamala. So it's like one of those things. So then, after all that, the Ant-Man head, the Thor hammer, Zoe hitting the wall, Kamala saving her, that happens right after. And then from there, they kind of just run away because Bruno and Kamala don't even know what happened. They're like totally shocked, and then they start running away. And then they end up getting back home. There's a little bit left from when she gets home, and we'll talk about it right now. But first, we're going to go to the comic book side and see how she got her power. So the fog comes in while Kamala's walking the streets trying to cool off, and something ends up happening where she gets like this vision again of Captain Marvel, Iron Man, and Captain America. And they're like talking to her like in this vision, and they're telling her like just talking, kind of babbling almost. It's like weird in the comic. Then like she ends up waking up somehow out of that little, dream hallucination. And then she's kind of in like a shell, or like a cocoon, she calls it, because she reaches out and it's like she's stuck. So she ends up breaking out of there. And now what you see is a teenage version pretty much of Captain Marvel. Blonde hair, white skin, just like thin, looking like Carol Danvers pretty much. And she's like, what's going on? And what happened? And why is everything like this? Then it goes back to Zoe and the guy she's with. They're on the pier, and he's trying to like kiss her and things like that and trying to be romantic, but he's also like been drinking, so he's kind of intoxicated. And then Zoe ends up falling into the lake or the ocean, and Kamala sees that happening. I don't know how far she is, obviously it's just a comic book, so she ends up running towards all that, and then she embiggens her hand, so it's like a big massive hand that comes into the ocean, and she picks up sand, dirt, she picks up bunch of garbage that's been in there, and then and Zoe as well. And then she puts Zoe down, and then Zoe's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, oh my gosh, who are you, like, are you Miss Marvel, all this stuff. And then they kind of make fun of Kamala's hand because it's still really big, and then they're like, what's going on with your hand? And then she's like, and then so she runs away, and then like she's like wondering too why her hand is so massive, and then she's like, I think she says, I'm big and down. And then like her hand goes back to normal size, which is pretty funny. So that's how she gets her powers in the comic book. And she even mentions that it's kind of funny because she's like, I feel different. And she's like, I feel like almost inhuman, which is pretty dope because if you're a comic book fan, you know, majority of all the Inhumans get their powers from this Terrigen mist. And that's actually what happened in the comic book. Now, there is a story before Miss Marvel explaining why the Terrigen mist was released through New Jersey City. I haven't read it, but I've heard that there is a story before that of why that happened. And then we get to Miss Marvel. So with that Terrigen mist, there was actually others that were affected by it, and so technically in the comics Miss Marvel is kind of like an Inhuman because technically she got her powers from the Terrigen mist, but in the Disney Plus she gets her powers through the bracelet. Okay, now that's pretty cool because two different ways of getting her powers, right? So we're seeing two different kind of options, and I like both of them, to be honest with you. I love the Terrigen mist more than this bracelet. It kind of feels like a 10 rings, you know, you put the 10 rings on and then you get these certain powers, but when you take it off, like, are you nobody? Like, are you just human? So I'm kind of still confused of how Miss Marvel gets her bracelet. Like, what if she loses it in battle? Does she just like have no powers? That part I'm confused about. Where in the comics, technically she always has her powers because she was affected by the Terrigen mist, which is pretty cool. All right, so now we're to the end of this video, pretty much. So in the Disney Plus show, Kamala, after the convention, sneaks back into her room, but her mom's there, right? So her mom's like, who is this person? Who is this girl that sneaks out? I don't recognize her, yada, 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 right? When you get in trouble, you sneak out, you get caught, and you get the talk. We all know that. Then her mom tells her at the end, like, do you want to be this good girl that we raised, or do you want to be like this cosmic head in the clouds type of person? So she lays down in bed, she's thinking about it, and then at the end of the episode, she's like, I want to be cosmic. So pretty much she chooses that she wants to stay with those powers and learn more from them. And that's very similar to the comic book. So at the end of, I think it's the second book, after she gets her powers and all that stuff, she goes back into her room, but she doesn't get caught technically. She gets in, but then she falls into her room. And then while she's falling, Amir's walking through the hallway, and he's like, Kamala, what are you doing? Like, where were you? And all this stuff. Or, you know, he's just asking her questions. But then he's like, oh, okay. She's like telling Amir, like, don't tell mom and dad. And then right when she says that, the parents walk into the room. And they're pretty much giving her the talk as well in the comic book. And then Kamala feels bad. She's laying in bed thinking about her thoughts. And she's like, you know, I saved somebody today. Is that all it is? I saved one person and then, you know, I give this up. But she's like, no, I want to be bigger. And then that's how it ends. So on the Disney Plus side, she wants to be cosmic. On the comic book side, she wants to be bigger. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, a lot of comparisons there to the comic book. Obviously different stories. Disney Plus is more relatable about everything that's going on in the MCU. with Thanos and where everything else is going to take off. And then the comic books, that's just straightforward, a whole story. So that's pretty much the end of this little comparison review that I've thought about. And hopefully we get to see more. So there's some last thoughts here. Hope we see more of villains, because there are quite a few in the first series, the 2014 to 2015. Nothing too big that Kamala can't handle, but it would be nice to see her kind of fight those small time villains that come out in the comics. Doesn't have to be true to the comics, but it'd be nice to see her kind of fight. Would definitely like to see her in a better costume. At the end of this series, I really hope we get to see Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel does show an appearance quite often in the comic books, especially in the second series, the 2016. She kind of comes out quite a bit, and in that second series, Kamala actually meets a lot of other superheroes, Miles Morales, Iron Man. So there's a lot. There's even I don't know why I'm drawing a little bit of the X-Men. So she has Xavier in there, kind of. He's kind of like a robot hologram type of thing, which is pretty cool. So definitely kind of went wild in the second series. So this first series, she does meet a major villain, and he ends up coming back in the second series of 2016 because they thought they had beat him, but then they didn't, but then he comes back. So hopefully we're going to see more of that and kind of how everything develops. So let me know what you thought of this little comparison review that I've made. If I made any wrong facts, just put it in the comments, and try to be nice. I told you in the beginning, I don't know everything, but from what I recall, from what I remember, this is what I thought about it. But I hopefully like the comparisons a bit. That was pretty cool of how they brought stuff in a little bit from the Marvel's Avengers game, then to the comics, which is really nice. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week for another one.